I spent $45,000 on my son's wedding. During the reception, he stood up and said, "I want to thank my real mother." Then he pointed toward my daughter-in-law's mother. I stayed silent. And I did something he would never forget. My name is Deborah Miller. I am 68 years old. Today, as I sit on the edge of my small apartment bed in Cleveland, Ohio, I can still taste the bitterness of that Saturday afternoon that forever changed my life. A Saturday that should have been the happiest day of my life turned into the day of my greatest humiliation. Do you know the feeling of holding a pain so deep inside that it feels like you're going to explode? That's what I've endured for the past 3 months. 3 months since my son's wedding. Louis. 3 months since I realized that 41 years of unconditional love could be erased by a single sentence. I always knew I wasn't Louis's biological mother. He came to me at just 3 years old. After the tragic death of my sister Susan and her husband Charles in a car accident back in 1987. But from the very first night he fell asleep in my arms, sobbing for his parents, I knew he was my son. No blood. No genetics needed. That boy was a gift from God to me. I raised him on my own, with no one to lean on. My husband, Michael, had left 2 years earlier. The moment we discovered I couldn't have children, he coldly told me there was no reason to stay with a woman who couldn't give him an heir. Can you imagine how deep that wound cut? At 28 years old, I stood at a dead end in life. No child, no husband, and no future. But then Louis came, and everything changed. He gave my life meaning. I worked as a seamstress, did laundry, cleaned houses, sold candy on the street all so my son would have what he needed: a decent education, clean clothes, a full meal. I never let him lack for anything. I still remember those nights sewing until late, just to finish orders by morning so I could pay his tuition. My hands swollen and red, my eyes burning. But I never stopped. Because every dollar I earned was another brick laid for my son's future. Louis was always tender and caring, calling me Mom, never once making a distinction. When he turned 18, I cried tears of pride as I watched him receive his high school diploma. He was the first in the family to graduate. When he got accepted into engineering school, I nearly fainted from joy. All through college, he still cared for me. Whenever he came home, he told me about his classes, his professors, his friends. We had dinners together. We watched TV together. Talked about everything. I felt like the most fulfilled woman in the world. I had a wonderful son, kind, loving, respectful. When he graduated at 24, I organized a small celebration at home myself. I invited neighbors, baked cakes, put my whole heart into it. He looked so handsome that day, in a borrowed suit, holding his diploma. I took so many pictures I used up 2 rolls of film. I just wanted to capture every second of that perfect day. After graduation, Louis landed a job at a construction company, making more money than I had ever earned in my life. He was generous with me, giving me grocery money, paying bills. I was proud I had raised such a good, responsible man. At 35, he was still living with me. Some neighbors said it was time he started his own family, but I didn't mind. I loved having my son close, taking care of him, doing his laundry, cooking meals, cleaning. That was my duty as a mother. Then one day, 6 years ago, he came home with a different look on his face, cheerful, glowing. He said he had met a girl at work, a secretary named Lauren. The way he spoke about her was full of affection, and I knew immediately it was love. I was happy for him. Of course, everyone deserves to find love. But when Lauren came to dinner for the first time, I felt something strange. She was beautiful, well-dressed, polite, But her eyes held a coldness, a distance. Through the whole meal, she barely spoke, answering curtly, her eyes fixed on her watch. In the following months, Louis went out more often, stayed out late, spent weekends at her place. I understood he was in love, but I felt I was slowly losing my son. Our conversations grew fewer. He spent more time in his room with his phone. When their relationship became official, I tried to bond with Lauren. I offered to teach her how to cook Louis's favorite dishes. She coldly said no need. Her mother had taught her everything. I invited her to Sunday lunch. She always found excuses. I realized she didn't like me, though I didn't understand why. I was always respectful, polite, never intrusive. And yet, my presence seemed to bother her, as if I were a wall between her and Louis. 3 years later, they announced their engagement. I burst into tears of joy, hugged them both, told them how happy I was. Lauren smiled, but it was forced. When I began talking about wedding preparations, she flatly said her mother would take care of everything. I didn't need to worry. But this was my son's wedding. I had a right to be part of it. I gave them my life savings, $45,000. The money I had scraped together over decades of hard work. Every penny saved with sacrifice. Almost everything I had. Lauren was surprised at the amount. Maybe she hadn't expected an old seamstress to have such savings. She accepted the money, but said she would handle everything: the reception, the decorations, the dress. All I had to do was show up that day. That night, lying in bed, my heart ached. Not from physical pain, but from the agony of being excluded from the most important moment of my son's life. But I reassured myself. Maybe it was just nerves. Just wedding stress. In the months leading up to it, Louis grew more distant. He came home only to sleep. No longer told me anything about the preparations. Every time I asked, he would say Lauren was handling it. I didn't need to bother. 1 week before the wedding, Lauren called me, saying she wanted to meet alone. She came to my house on a Thursday afternoon, still dressed neatly and elegantly as always. But there was something different in her eyes, a hardness, almost cruelty. She sat down in the living room and went straight to the point. She said that after the wedding, they would move into a new apartment they had just bought in Chicago. That I could no longer treat Louis as my son. That he now had a new family and I needed to understand my place. Her words left me stunned. I asked, what place was that? She replied that I was only the aunt who had raised him, not his mother. That his mother was gone. And now he had a new family. She said I could visit from time to time, but I was not to interfere in their lives anymore. Those words struck my heart like a punch. 41 years of care, sacrifice, and now I was nothing more than the aunt who raised him. Me, the one who woke in the middle of the night whenever he was sick. The one who worked myself ragged to pay his tuition. The one who gave up my entire life just to make sure he had everything. That day, Lauren left my house, leaving behind a cold message. My role in Louis's life was over. The wedding was only a formality. And after that, I would have to accept the scraps of attention that remained. I sat motionless in the armchair until nightfall, trying to digest her words. That night, I cried like I hadn't in years. Not only tears of sadness, but tears of outrage. Who gave her the right to tell me my place in my son's life? And how could Louis let her speak to me that way? But the worst was yet to come. It happened the following Saturday, on the wedding day itself. The day I discovered that all of Lauren's harsh words were only the prelude to the humiliation awaiting me. That morning, I woke with a tightness in my chest I couldn't explain. As if my heart already knew something terrible was about to happen. I had breakfast alone, staring out the kitchen window, trying to push away the bad thoughts. Today was my son's wedding day. I should have been happy. But I couldn't. There was something in the air. A heavy tension I couldn't escape. Lauren's words still echoed in my head. You're just the aunt who raised him. As if 41 years of sacrifice had been nothing more than a favor I had done for the family. I put on the emerald green dress I had bought just for the wedding. Not too expensive, but proper and elegant. On Friday I had gone to the salon, just hoping I would look beautiful for Louis's big day, even though Lauren had implied I was only a supporting character in this story. It was still my son's wedding, and I had to be there. But when I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a loneliness I couldn't describe. I was getting ready for my son's wedding, but I felt like a stranger, as if I had no right to be part of that moment. After finishing my makeup, I sat in the living room waiting for Louis to come, waiting for him to stop by, waiting for him to want to be with his mother before the big moment. But time passed, and nothing. The phone stayed silent. The door never opened. I was completely alone on the most important day of my son's life. And in that moment, I realized everything Lauren had said was true. I had truly been cut out of Louis's life. Not an illusion. Not a fleeting feeling. But a raw, painful truth I had ignored for too long. I picked up my purse, locked the door, and called a cab. I was going to the wedding. But I was no longer the woman who had woken up that morning. Something inside me had changed. A certainty, both painful and liberating, that I was no longer important in my son's life. And that very certainty, though it tore my heart apart, it would give me the strength to face whatever awaited me. The wedding day began with brilliant golden sunshine. A day that seemed blessed by God. I woke up at 5 a.m., as usual. But inside I carried a strange premonition. This was my son's wedding day. The day I had dreamed of for so many years. I brewed coffee, sat in the kitchen looking out the window, imagining that sacred moment. But that morning felt different, as if my heart knew something my mind had not yet understood. I tried to push it away. This was Louis's wedding. I should have been happy. The ceremony would take place at 4 p.m. in a large church downtown in Milwaukee. The one Lauren's family often attended. I had never set foot in it. But Louis said it was beautiful. That they had chosen it with great care. I was glad my son would be married in a church, since I had raised him in the Christian faith. All morning, I waited for Louis, thinking he would get ready at home, or at least stop by before the big moment. After all, this was a special day for both mother and son. But the hours slipped by, and still nothing. 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. The heavy silence was suffocating. By 2:30, I couldn't bear it anymore. So I called. My hands trembled. My voice shook. He picked up. His voice rushed, with music and chatter in the background. He said he was at Lauren's parents' house getting ready. Still had a lot to do. And that we would meet at the church. He didn't ask if I was okay, if I had a ride. Just a few short words. Then he hung up. I sat there, phone still in my hand, my heart aching. My son was getting married, and he hadn't even thought of his mother in that chaos. I tried to tell myself he's just nervous, stressed. Everyone is on their wedding day. I called a cab to take me to the church. The driver was a kind old man named John. He asked if I was going to a wedding. I said yes. It was my son's wedding. He congratulated me, said I must be so proud. I smiled, nodded. But inside, the heaviness was still there, impossible to shake. When I arrived at the church, I was overwhelmed by the sight. Fresh flowers everywhere, elaborate arrangements, everything elegant and refined. Lauren's family clearly had money and taste. I felt small in the midst of that splendor. But I tried to keep my composure. After all, part of it was my money too, $45,000 I had saved over a lifetime. I looked for a place to sit, but I didn't know where I belonged. No one had told me in advance. No message. No instructions. I looked at the rows in the front, reserved for family. On the right, it read, bride's family. On the left, groom's family. For a moment, I hesitated, then walked toward the groom's side. As I approached, a young woman arranging seats asked who I was. I told her I was Louis's mother. She looked me up and down, checked her list, then said I should sit further back because the front row was reserved for the closest family. My face burned with shame. Why, further back I was the groom's mother. No one could be closer than me. But I didn't want to cause a scene. I accepted a seat in the fourth row, behind people I didn't even know. People who certainly weren't as important to Louis as I was. While waiting for the ceremony to begin, I watched the church fill up. So many elegant people, dressed to impress, chatting away. I felt lost in that crowd. I didn't know anyone. No one spoke to me, as if I were a stranger at my own son's wedding. From my seat, I could see the front row on the groom's side. There sat Louis's groomsmen. Some distant relatives I barely saw. His co-workers, people he had only known for a few years, occupying seats of honor. While I, who had raised him since he was 3, sat in the back. As the ceremony began, my heart pounded. First, Louis walked in, handsome in his tuxedo, escorted by Lauren's father. I wanted to cry with pride, seeing him so grown, so dignified. My little boy had become a man, but painfully. He didn't walk in with me, his mother. He walked with his father-in-law. Then Lauren entered, radiant in her wedding gown. Like a princess, she walked with her father, glowing with smiles. As she passed me, she didn't glance my way. Her eyes were only on Louis, as if he were the only person in the church. While I was invisible, the ceremony was beautiful. The priest spoke of love and of family, of unity. I broke down in tears as I heard the vows. Watching my son promise to love Lauren for life, that should have been the most sacred moment of my life. Seeing my son happy, fulfilling his dream. But my joy was mixed with a bitter ache. I was witnessing it all from a distance, like an outsider. I hadn't been part of the planning. I hadn't had a voice in a single decision. I was just a guest at the wedding of the boy I had raised. When they kissed, I clapped through my tears. My son was married. He had found the love of his life. Despite the struggles with Lauren, I was genuinely happy for him. This was the moment I had waited for all these years. When leaving the church, I tried to get close to the young couple to congratulate them, but the crowd pressed in. Everyone wanting pictures, wanting to talk. I managed to reach Louis, hugged him once. He hugged me back, but quickly, hurriedly. I told him he looked wonderful, that I was so proud. He smiled faintly, said thanks, then turned his eyes elsewhere. I tried to speak to Lauren, to give her my blessing. She answered coldly, politely, without warmth, and never once called me mother-in-law, as she should have. The reception was held at a banquet hall across town. I called another cab, my heart heavy. I felt like just an ordinary guest at my own son's wedding. No part in the planning, no seat of honor, no conversations. When I arrived, again, I was struck by the extravagance. Lavish decorations, dazzling tables, flowers everywhere. It must have cost a fortune. A part of it was from the $45,000 I had given. But no one knew. No one acknowledged it. Again, I looked for my seat. I didn't know which table was mine. I asked one of the staff. She checked her list and led me to a table at the very back of the hall, table 12. Far from the bride and groom's table, far from both families. I sat with a few of Lauren's distant relatives, Some of Louis's co-workers, people practically strangers to me. I tried to make small talk. But it was difficult. I felt lost. With nothing in common. During dinner, I looked toward table 1, where Louis and Lauren sat in the center of the hall. Shining. Surrounded by both families. Lauren's parents sat right beside them. Laughing. Toasting. Part of every moment. I wished I could be there. But instead I sat far away. Nearly invisible. I watched Lauren's father stand and give a heartfelt toast. I saw her mother hug Louis as if he were her own son. They took pictures together. Always the 4 of them, the new family, and me. Silent at table 12. Watching from a distance. The people at my table asked what relation I was to the couple. I answered that I was Louis's mother. I caught the surprise in their eyes if I was the groom's mother. Why was I sitting at the back? Why wasn't I at the main table, after dinner? The speeches began. First, Lauren's father spoke, thanking everyone for coming. Blessing the couple, he said he was happy to have gained another son. That Louis was truly special. The entire room applauded with emotion. Then, Lauren's mother spoke. Tears in her eyes. Sharing her joy at seeing her daughter marry such a wonderful man. She said she had thought of him as a son from the very beginning. And now he was officially part of her family. Tears fell from my eyes. But not from happiness. I waited for my turn. I was the groom's mother. I had prepared a few words. Wanting to thank the guests. To share a little about Louis's childhood. About how proud I was of him. But my turn never came. No one called my name. The host didn't even mention me. As if I didn't exist. As if Louis had never had a mother, or rather, as if Lauren's parents were now truly his mom and dad. When Louis stood up to speak, my heart tightened. Finally, he would mention me. Thank me for everything. He would tell them I had raised him. Sacrificed my entire life for him. He began by thanking all the guests. He spoke about his love for Lauren. About the happiness of finding her. Then he began to talk about gratitude. About the important people in his life. My heart pounded so loudly, I thought everyone must hear it. This is it. I told myself. Now he would mention me. He would tell everyone how much I meant in his life. He would call me up. Hug me. Thank me in front of everyone. But then he said the words that destroyed my soul forever. Words that, even 3 months later, still echo in my mind. Words that completely changed my life. Making me realize I had been a fool for 41 years. He said, I want to especially thank my real mother. The one who has always been by my side. Who accepted me as her son from the very first day. Who gave me all the love I needed. And then he pointed directly at Lauren's mother. My world collapsed. I, the one who had raised him since he was 3. Who gave up everything for him. Who worked day and night just so he could have a decent life, was erased completely. Lauren's mother, who had only known him for 6 years, was his real mother. 41 years of unconditional love thrown in the trash in a single sentence. I felt the eyes on me, some pitying, some curious, some pretending they hadn't heard. The silence after his words was deafening. I was humiliated publicly at my own son's wedding. 41 years of sacrifice wiped away in an instant. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't protest. I sat there. My head held high. Pretending I hadn't heard a thing. But inside, something had died. The devoted mother. The woman who lived only for her son. The Deborah who forgave everything, died in that moment. In her place. Someone new was born cold. Unyielding. Determined. I understood I didn't deserve to be treated this way. That no one deserved to be trampled like that. I looked at Louis standing at the altar. Saw him hug Lauren's mother, as if she were truly the most important person in his life. And for the first time ever, I felt something toward my own son I had never felt before: contempt. The reception carried on, as if nothing had happened. People laughed, clinked glasses, offered congratulations. A few who knew me looked uneasy, but no one came near. No one asked. Everyone pretended it was perfectly normal for a mother to be erased from her son's wedding. Sitting at the table in the far back, I began calculating. $45,000. Every penny I had given for that wedding. A lifetime of savings. Just to be humiliated at the very party I helped pay for. The bitterness was almost a taste in my mouth. The rest of the night, I just watched my son. He danced the waltz with Lauren, then with her mother. An emotional dance. He held her gently, while she wept with joy. That dance should have been mine, the moment I had dreamed of for years. To have my son lead me on the dance floor at his wedding. No one invited me to dance. No one spoke to me. I was like a ghost, present but unseen. By 10 p.m., while the party still buzzed with music and laughter, I quietly stood up and left. No one noticed. Not Louis. Not Lauren. Not anyone. I called a cab home. On the way, the driver made small talk. Asked if the party was fun. I said, yes. But my voice caught. He must have sensed something and didn't press further. When I got home, I sat in the dark. No lights. No TV. Just sat there in silence, replaying every moment. My son had erased me from his life in the cruelest way possible. In front of everyone. On his most important day. That night I couldn't sleep. Lying there, staring at the ceiling. I replayed every second of his speech. Every word of Louis echoed in my head, my real mother, as if I had been nothing but a fraud. Playing the role of mother all these years. When the sun rose on Sunday morning, I had made my decision. I would no longer be the Deborah who endured. The mother who swallowed every humiliation for love. I would show my son he had made the biggest mistake of his life, that there are words you can never take back. Wounds that never heal. I got out of bed, filled with a determination I hadn't felt in years. I showered, dressed, then opened the closet. Deep inside, behind old blankets, was the folder with all my financial records, bank books, investment certificates, property deeds. I sat at the kitchen table and began calculating. Beyond the $45,000 I had given for the wedding, I had more money than Louis ever imagined. An inheritance I had received, along with everything I had saved throughout my life. All of it had once been meant for him, for when I passed away. For when he struggled to secure his future. But now, after that humiliation, I no longer wanted him to have a single dime. On Monday morning, I went to the bank, withdrew all my investments, and transferred everything into a new account under my name only. Then I went to my lawyer's office and the notary. I wanted to draft a new will, erasing Louis from my entire inheritance. The lawyer, Henry, was stunned when he heard me out. He said it was too extreme a decision, that I should think carefully. But my mind was made up. I told him everything that had happened at the wedding, how I had been humiliated. He shook his head in outrage and said he would carry out my request. But removing Louis from the will wasn't enough. I wanted more. I wanted him to truly understand my worth. And then, an idea struck me, an idea that would change everything. I began researching nonprofit organizations that helped single mothers, abandoned women, and vulnerable elderly. I wanted to use my money to create a fund, a foundation to support women like me, women who had sacrificed everything for their families, only to be cast aside. I consulted several civil law attorneys. They explained the legal process to establish a foundation, how it would operate, complicated as it was. I was determined. I would use my assets to change the lives of other women. While handling the paperwork, I also thought about myself. I was 68. Still healthy. With enough money to live comfortably. Why should I stay in that house? In that city? Surrounded only by painful memories. That's when I remembered my cousin Connie, who lived in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. For years, she had invited me to visit, always saying I would love the ocean air and the people there. Maybe it was time to accept. Maybe it was time to start over somewhere new. I called Connie and told her everything that had happened. She was furious, cursing Louis with every harsh word. She said I should sue him for elder abandonment. But I didn't want that. I didn't need revenge. Didn't want more drama. I just wanted him to know I was no longer the submissive Deborah he thought I was. Connie offered me a place in her home. She said her house was spacious, and the two of us living together would be wonderful. The thought gave me relief. It would be a true, new beginning. Far from everything that tied me to the old life. A week after the wedding, Louis came home. He walked in smiling, suitcase in hand, as if everything was the same. He said he had just returned from the honeymoon. Wanted to tell me all about it. As if nothing had happened. As if that public humiliation had been only my imagination. He sat down in the living room, opened the honeymoon album, and began showing it off. Pictures of him and Lauren in Cancun. Laughing. Radiant. Enjoying the best days of their lives. I looked politely. But my heart was cold. I no longer felt the joy I once did when seeing him happy. When he finished, he asked how I was. If I had missed him. I told him I was fine. That there was no problem. He seemed surprised by my coldness, but brushed it off. He said Lauren wanted to invite me to dinner at their new house over the weekend. That's when I decided to say it all. I told him I would not be coming. Because I was moving. I had decided to relocate to Myrtle Beach to live with my cousin. And this house would be closed for the time being. Louis froze. He asked why I had made such a decision. If it was because of something he had done. That naive question infuriated me. He truly didn't grasp the seriousness of what had happened at the wedding. Coldly, I reminded him of his speech. Of the humiliation I had endured. Of how he had erased me from his life. I told him that if he considered Lauren's mother to be his real mother, then I was free to live my own life. He tried to justify himself, saying I had overreacted, that it had only been an emotional speech, that he hadn't meant to deny me. But I no longer accepted empty apologies. I made it clear my decision was final. That night, after he left, I began packing. I chose clothes, books, personal belongings I wanted to take. The rest I left in the house, covered with white cloths, waiting for a decision later. 3 days later, the paperwork for the foundation was complete. The Deborah Foundation supporting women in hardship. My entire estate, every asset, I would dedicate to helping women like me, women who had given everything only to be forgotten. The next day, I boarded a bus to Myrtle Beach. I carried only 2 suitcases and one unshakable belief my life was just beginning. At 68, I had finally found the courage to live for myself. Myrtle Beach welcomed me with the fresh ocean breeze I hadn't felt in years. When I stepped off the bus, Connie was waiting. Her warm smile, easing my heart. She was 71. Her silver hair neatly cut. Of her strong presence, something younger women could admire. We hugged tightly right there at the station. And I knew I had made the right choice. Connie's apartment was on the 10th floor. Just 2 blocks from the beach. When I walked in and saw the ocean for the first time through the window, I broke down in tears. Not tears of sorrow, but of release. At last, I was in a place where I could breathe without the weight of anyone's expectations. Connie had prepared the guest room for me, simple but warm. With a window facing the sea. She told me I could stay as long as I wanted. and that she was happy to have me as her companion. That first night, I sat out on the balcony, listening to the waves, and felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The next morning, I woke early and walked on the beach. Soft sand under my feet, the salty ocean air, the gentle morning sun on my skin. I felt like I was discovering the world for the first time. I walked for over an hour, breathing deeply, feeling every cell in my body come alive again. During my walk, I met others my age exercising, chatting, enjoying life. An older woman named Dolores greeted me and struck up a conversation. She was 72, widowed, and had moved here 5 years ago. She said it was the best decision of her life. Dolores told me she joined a seniors club that met 3 times a week. They exercised on the beach, took dance lessons, did crafts, and went on cultural outings. She invited me to join, and I agreed immediately. How long had it been since I'd joined a group purely for joy, not out of responsibility? In those first days, I slowly built a new rhythm of life, waking early, walking along the beach, having breakfast with Connie, finishing books I had left unfinished, chatting with new friends, a simple life. But it was mine. No one forced me to do anything. No one expected me to be someone else. A week after I arrived, Louis called. He sounded worried. Said he had stopped by the house in Ohio and found it locked and silent. He wanted to know how I was, if I needed anything. I told him I was doing very well, that I loved this new city, that I needed nothing at all. He was surprised by my tone. I was different, stronger, more certain. He asked when I would be back, if this was just a vacation. I told him I didn't know, that I was thinking of staying longer. The conversation was polite, but cold. I no longer wanted to pretend everything was fine. 2 weeks later, I began joining Dolores's group activities. The first was a dance class on the beach. I, who hadn't danced in over 20 years, suddenly found myself moving to the music, laughing at my own clumsiness, enjoying myself like a young girl again. It was liberating to realize I could still learn new things. It was in that group that I met Rose, a 75-year-old woman who had created a small community library in the neighborhood. She needed volunteers to help organize and assist readers. I volunteered immediately. I had always loved books, and the thought of helping others discover reading excited me. Working in the library, I heard so many fascinating stories. Children came to study because they had no quiet place at home. Young people preparing for exams. Elderly folks in their 70s discovering joy in the pages of a book. I felt useful in a way I hadn't in a very long time. A month after I moved, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Henry, the lawyer, from Cleveland, Ohio. He said he needed my signature on some documents. I decided to return to the city just to handle the legal procedures. The trip back felt strange. As the bus entered Cleveland, my chest tightened, not from longing, but from anxiety, as if I were returning to a place that no longer belonged to me. I stayed only 2 days, just long enough to sign papers and look over the house. It was exactly as I had left it, shut tight, musty, filled with memories that no longer held any goodness. I walked through the rooms and realized that life was no longer mine. The Deborah, who had lived only for her son, was buried in those walls. At Henry's office, I signed the final documents for the Deborah Foundation. He explained that everything was settled, that my entire estate would go toward helping women in hardship. A wave of pride rose in me. My money would truly change lives. Before heading back to Myrtle Beach, I visited my old neighbor, Teresa. She was surprised to see me. Said she had missed me. I told her about my new life by the ocean, about the happiness I had rediscovered. She said I looked younger, more alive. Teresa told me Louis had stopped by a few times. asking about me, saying he was worried, that he didn't understand why I had made such a decision. She had tried to explain to him about the humiliation at the wedding, but he insisted I had overreacted. When I returned to Myrtle Beach, I dove into my new rhythm. Beyond the library work, I joined a seniors choir. I discovered that I had quite a good voice and a true love for singing. How long had it been since I had done something purely for my own joy? Connie was delighted to see me changing. She said I had come here as one person, but was becoming another, happier, more decisive, more in control of my life. She was right. For the first time, I was living for myself. 3 months after moving, I decided I wanted my own space. Living with Connie was wonderful, but I still wanted my own place, my own things. Complete independence. I looked around the area and found a small but charming apartment facing the ocean. A 2-bedroom on the 5th floor. Fully furnished. Ready to live in. The rent was well within my means. When I signed the lease, I felt a freedom I had never known before. For the first time, I had a home entirely of my own. I moved in on a bright Saturday morning. Connie helped me settle. And that afternoon we brewed tea and held a little celebration. I invited Dolores, Rose, and a few new friends. It was the first party of my life where I was truly the host of my own life. That night, sitting on the balcony under the moonlight, looking out at the ocean, I received a phone call from Louis. His voice was different, more serious. He said he wanted to meet me in person, and that he was thinking of visiting me. I told him he was always welcome, but that I would not change my decision about this new life. That call made me reflect on everything from the past few months. I had left Cleveland as a woman trampled, humiliated, invisible. And now I was independent. With friends, activities, plans. I realized that happiness was possible without living for someone else. 2 weeks later, Louis truly came to Myrtle Beach. When I opened the door and saw him standing there, my heart was overwhelmed with emotion. He was still my son. I still loved him. But it was no longer the blind, submissive love of before. It was a love with awareness, with boundaries. He stepped into the apartment, amazed by everything. He said I looked healthy, that the place was beautiful. We talked for hours. But it was a different kind of conversation. I no longer rushed to please him. No longer cared whether he agreed with my decisions or not. When he asked about my future plans, whether I would return to Cleveland, I told him I didn't know. That I was happy here. That I had found my place in life. He seemed unsettled by my answer. Perhaps he had expected to see a frail, regretful woman, eager to return to her old life. But the person he saw now was a completely different Deborah, the true Deborah. The one buried for decades. And this Deborah had much to say about her life and her relationships from this point on. Louis stayed for 3 days. And with each passing day, I could see his unease in facing this new version of me. He had expected a dependent woman, someone who needed him to survive. But instead, he found someone who no longer needed him to be happy. On the 2nd day, I took him to the library where I volunteered. Rose greeted him warmly and told him that I was the backbone of the project, that I organized books, helped children with homework, and ran reading programs. I saw the astonishment in Louis's eyes. He was discovering a part of me he had never known. For so many years, I had lived only for him, hiding my own talents and dreams. Now, at 68, they were finally blossoming. That evening, we had dinner at the apartment. I made a simple but delicious meal. During dinner, he told me I looked completely different, more confident, more decisive. He asked if I missed Cleveland, if I missed my old life. I told him I missed some things, but I would never give up this new life. For the first time, I was living for myself. making choices based on what made me happy, not on others' expectations. It was a feeling of freedom he might never understand. By the third day, Louis finally dared to bring up what was troubling him most. He asked about my will, about the rumors in Cleveland that I had created a foundation. He said he was worried about my financial future. I calmly explained to him about the Deborah Foundation, that I had decided to dedicate my entire estate to helping women in vulnerable circumstances. Women like me, who had given everything for others only to be forgotten. I believed it was far more just than leaving money to someone who didn't appreciate me. Louis' face changed completely. For the first time, I think he understood the seriousness of what he had done at the wedding. This wasn't just about hurt feelings. It was about respect, recognition, dignity, things he had publicly denied me. He tried to justify himself, said we could talk, that he had learned from his mistake. But I made it clear this wasn't punishment or revenge, it was justice. He had made his choice when he humiliated me. And now, I was making mine. Before leaving, Louis hugged me in a way that was entirely different. Not a perfunctory hug, but one of someone who finally realized what he had lost. He said he respected my decision, but hoped we would keep in touch. That he wanted to know more about the strong woman I had become. After he left, I sat on the balcony, reflecting on the visit. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I only felt a deep peace. The circle had closed. I had freed myself from the burden of living only for my son, and he had begun to grasp the consequences of his own actions. A week later, I received a letter from Louis. A long, handwritten letter in which he sincerely apologized for what had happened at the wedding. He said he finally understood how much I had sacrificed for him, how important I truly was, that Lauren's mother could never replace me in his life. The letter moved me, but it didn't change my decision. Knowing that he understood, that he had grown, was good, but I no longer needed his validation to feel whole. I had found my own source of happiness. I replied warmly but firmly. I told him I accepted his apology, held no resentment, but that my new life was only beginning. He was always welcome to visit, to meet the woman I had become. But from now on, our relationship would be entirely different. At the Deborah Foundation, every story that came in confirmed I had chosen the right path. The first woman we helped was Celeste, 74, who had been thrown out of her own home by her children. Seeing her regain her dignity was more precious than any hug from my son. Rose encouraged me to share my story at a library event. She believed it would inspire many other women not to accept being diminished, but to cherish their own lives. At first I hesitated, but then I agreed. On the day of the talk, the hall was packed. Women of all ages, many with stories like mine. I told them about my journey, that it is never too late to start over, that no woman should accept being reduced to a shadow in her own life. At the end, a 75-year-old woman approached me. She said her children had forced her to sell her house to support them, that she had always yielded her whole life. But my story had changed her perspective. We talked for a long time, and she left determined to stand up for her own rights. A month after the foundation began operating, we held our first fundraising event. Louis came from Ohio to attend. He seemed genuinely proud of what I had built. In his speech, he called me the bravest woman I have ever known. This time, those words warmed my heart. But what moved me most was hearing 3 women the foundation had helped tell their stories of struggle, renewal, and rediscovered strength. I had turned pain into purpose, humiliation into hope for others. Today, 3 months after that fateful wedding, I can say I am a happy woman. Not because I took revenge on the family that once belittled me, but because I freed myself from a situation that diminished my worth. My new rhythm of life in Myrtle Beach is full of meaning. I work at the library 3 mornings a week, sing in the choir on Tuesdays and Thursdays, coordinate the foundation's activities on Saturdays, take painting classes on Wednesdays, and walk the beach every early morning. Louis visits occasionally. Our relationship has improved, but on an entirely different foundation. He respects me now, because he understands there is no other choice. I am no longer the mother, desperate for scraps of affection. I am an independent woman who decides when and how to connect with him. Lauren has never spoken directly to me again. According to Louis, she struggles to accept this change, unable to understand how I could become so different in such a short time. But the truth is, I didn't change. I simply returned to myself, the woman who had been buried beneath decades of submission. Sometimes, sitting on my balcony, watching the sun set over the ocean, I think about how life can transform in just 3 months. The humiliating speech at the wedding was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new one. My silence that day, when my son publicly shamed me, turned out to be the most powerful silence of my life. It was the silence of a woman who had finally discovered her inner strength. And once found, that strength didn't just change my life, it changed the lives of dozens of other women too. It is never too late to reclaim your dignity. It is never too late to demand respect. It is never too late to choose happiness for yourself. Your life is worth far more than the scraps of affection others may toss your way. Today, at 68, I have new plans, expanding the foundation to more cities across the U.S., writing a book about my journey, traveling to the places I have always dreamed of. I have a list of dreams locked away in the drawer of my soul, and now I am bringing them to life, one by one. My name is Deborah Miller. For 68 years, I was known only as Louis's mother, but today, I am Deborah, an independent, whole woman who has chosen to live her own life. And I can say with certainty, this is the best version of myself I have ever known. The silence I held on that day of humiliation has become my greatest strength. And that strength has taught me that happiness does not come from being indispensable to others, but from being important to yourself. And that, no one can ever take away. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like, subscribe to my channel, Shattered Trust, and comment below if you were in my place. What would you do? Who knows? Maybe your words will brighten someone's day.